Good morning. Aren't I the lucky one? Eh? Now, she won't show, but the morning star is about there. Venus. My Trifid. Doing well. But look at this. Eh? And more important, just listen. I could be totally in the middle of nowhere. No noises off at all. So, count one's blessings. God is the boss. Until you are absolutely sure of that, then go and think again. Come back again, and until you realise that God is the boss, you are not on the right path. Whatever path you're on, it's leading nowhere. And that is loving God through Christ. Amen. There is no other path. Christ says, John chapter 14, verse 6, I think, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one shall come to the Father but through me. Amen. And then, for me, and it's a lifelong work, clearly, I'm 65 years old, so I'm not exactly a spring chicken anymore, am I? Don't even politicians start to look young? It's policemen normally. I'm afraid I've seen far too much of them. I had a whole week last week, I didn't see a single policeman. Oh, I get withdrawal symptoms. I've had my troubles here. What are they compared to the rest of the world? Sri Lanka's a basket case. They have set fire to the... invaded the presidential palace or whatever. Yeah, and what's next? Their political elite has imploded, but our lot here in Britain are only marginally better. They've gone along with a man who is just awful. They shouldn't have put him in Prime Minister at all. The word is gravitas. When I grew up, I don't know, they all seemed like such eminent, sensible figures, politicians. Now they just seem like a complete blooming shower. To me, I mean. So whether that's because I've now aged, I hope I'm aging well, like a fine wine. But every time I turn the news on, there seem to be a few more throwing their hat into the ring, as they say. Well, heaven help us if that's all we've got, quite frankly. And as I've just said, it is only from heaven that our salvation shall come. I scroll through the sort of news feed. We've just sent over 6 F-35 jets, we Britain, so the RAF, to conduct exercises with Sweden and Finland. And Finland, of course, has a border, I've just looked, so 835 miles long with, guess who? Russia. Well, we know what that's all about, don't we? They're applying to join NATO, aren't they? Finland and Sweden. It's called saber rattling, isn't it? God is the boss. Mankind of itself clearly is heading to hell in a handcart. The coin of phrase, heading towards Armageddon. I've seen it clearly for decades, actually. If I look back, I've only been making these films since early spring 2008, so that's 14 years plus. But one of my earlier films, at least 10 years ago, rather more, I think, more like 12, I think, and I'm saying exactly the same thing. The West has lost its way. The analogy then I used was it's like a supertanker, full steam ahead, heading straight for the dock wall. Crash, bang, wallop. That's how I've sensed the Western approach to its affairs, or the world's approach, quite frankly, not just the West. And the sort of mindset of the great and the good is, that's with America now, the greatest and the goodest. I must go back to school or not say the right word. All right, the great and the best, but that doesn't sound right. It's the great and the good. Nuke the bastards, excuse the French, basically. Hit them harder where it hurts before they hit you, if you can possibly organize it. Brilliant. But it's not. Where's the love involved? Increase the capacity of one's weapons. Increase so-called defense spending. Can no one else see this? Am I really so alone? As a Christian, Christ's teaching is so clear. If they strike you on one cheek, give unto them the other cheek. Every single hair on the head of your fellow man, woman, and child is precious and special. You can't even, shouldn't even harm a single head on the head of your fellow, whomever they may be. Your direct, actual, physical neighbour, or nowadays could be the other end of the world. And push a button and all sorts of stuff can happen. You can either put your tuppence worth on the balance, on the good side, or the other side. It really is so simple. And little people get it. Little 7-year-olds playing in the playground. Little Johnny pulls Mary's ponytail and Mary pinches his bum. They both know they've done the wrong thing. And certainly by 13, the mitzvah age for Jewish people. It's a sort of coming of age, actually. They're pretty clued in about the world in general, the world in which they live. Obviously, one matures from there onwards, but in terms of one's sense of right and wrong, moral rectitude, integrity, an honest man has no superior. All that stuff which I imbibed through my mother's milk, as it were, but that was definitely a phrase my mother would use. An honest man has no superior, which presumably the converse is true. A dishonest man is down in the gutter somewhere. All the stuff that this former Prime Minister may or may not have done is just going to be trashed, including the possibility of undoing Brexit, actually. Now there's a thing for us in Britain. I couldn't give tuppence. I really couldn't. I've given up with the politicians. Yes, we have to have them, but oh dear. If there were anyone worth voting for, yes, I'd go and vote like a shot. I mean, since Magna Carta, for heaven's sake, that's 1215. King John, was it? Got all the knights and nobles or something round a big round table, or is that King Arthur? Oh dear. I just failed my history exam there. 1215 for sure. My folk are from father's side at King's Lynn, and it got its king's bit in the year 1208. So this idea of its charter, hence King's Lynn, of free men and women, obviously sort of came later, but you're a free person in England, has been with us, that's over 800 years. I am in the fortunate position of having sufficient funds to fund my own little life. I don't have great expenses. I mean, I rent this place, but it's all sort of settling down now a bit, so I've got a stable home base, and then I've got to feed and water myself, basically. I've got availability to medical services, which again I'm afraid I need. So lucky me, but I've got here somehow. I found myself watching, I do ramble on, but anyway, I always had a bit of a thing about actually more rallying motor cars than the Formula One. I've always thought Formula One's boring, but they did a super documentary of Ayrton Senna, an hour-long documentary of Ayrton Senna, who of course died in a huge smash. Had his own private 125 British Aerospace jet and his own helicopter. I don't envy him. I always thought Formula One, still do think Formula One's kind of boring. All they do is go round in circles, basically. Whereas rallying to me always somehow was, I don't know, just more interesting, basically. You know, I've sort of vaguely fancied myself as a bit of a driver in my time. I did actually have a rally-prepared RS2000 Escort, and I sort of souped up my little Peugeot 106 as well a bit, stuck in a roll cage and all that. Messed with the suspension, had the engine chipped, that sort of stuff. Full rally, 5-point harness, wooden steering. Silly me. My dogs had more room in the back than I did, actually. I used to sleep in it. They had more room than me. So the point there being, and the other one, so then I was another hour-long documentary on Colin McRae. So Jimmy McRae was more my era, his father. But Colin McRae then won for Britain, for Scotland, the World Rally Championship in 1995. And then he went and piled his helicopter into a hill in 2007, so died very young. How tragic. But he just went for it. And over the top quite often. But he was married by then with 2 children and a farm somewhere in Lanarkshire, I think. Scotland, sort of borders the southern Scottish, the southern part of Scotland. Emerson Fittipaldi was sort of my hero growing up. And there's a lovely long interview by the Royal Automobile Club or something of him. I just like him, Fittipaldi. He found God later on, so he's a Christian. So through his platform of world renown through his motor racing, he can bring this message of love of God through Christ. Ayrton Senna, the figure keeps popping up, so it must be in that ballpark. I don't like the phrase, but apparently spent some $400 million on projects and stuff to help poor children in Brazil. So good on him. He had I believe he too was a Roman Catholic practicing and known, he'd be flying over to Europe for the next season. He spent half of his life in Brazil, sort of chilling, as it were, living a vaguely normal life. I don't think he was married. I think he had several women friends. I don't think he had children either. I must check, but I don't think so. So good on him. He had a strong social conscience too. Apparently he was a very quiet sort of chap, but dedicated. He'd be there, knocking at the engineers' doors when they're testing a new car. And of course, Formula One is just off the scale in terms of the actual motoring experience, as it were. Just the power and the speed and the G-forces and braking ability and all the rest of it, so handling and so on. But to me, it all just seems a bit boring. They just go around in a circle. They're not getting anywhere, are they? Whereas the Paris-Dakar rally, that's the thing. I think one of the stages is 507 miles. I don't know why. I have time, I suppose. I found myself just wandering around through these sort of motoring types. There was Graham Hill then. He piled his plane round my area, Elstree. Mill Hill, Edgware, Hendon is my sort of London patch. So he died, and he was 45 only, for heaven's sake. And of course his son, Damon Hill, they are also won the World Formula One title 1 year, I'm sure that's right. So they've become the only father-son combination to do that. So he was interviewed too by, just can't think, it may have been David Coulthard doing this, but it wasn't. It was someone else. Anyway, so I've had a bit of a binge on these top motorsports people, and just watching them, what motivates them, what made Colin McRae stand out. Well, he just had this sort of spark. God is the boss. That's the theme for today. He's my boss. He's the world's boss, whether you recognize it or not. To some extent, it's irrelevant. He'd love us to love him in exactly the same way that ordinary, normal human parents would hope that their children love them. Well, we're exactly the same grown-up adults. God keeps hoping that we will love him. Amen to that. So then, for me, it's this, my favourite hymn. A small blast, because I do have neighbours and I've got big strong lungs still. Guide me, O thy great Jehovah, lead me through this barren land. But thou art mighty, hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Feed me now and evermore. And I'll say amen to that. Oh, what happened to the monks? Don't wake the monks up. Second Book of Kings, cheerio. God is the boss.